This is not a review of The Invisible Man. This is a reaction to how the film has been perceived on the market, both by the horror community, by the horror journalists, and by the mainstream. All of them are overwhelmingly positive, and it's a great film to look at, but I found it to have significant plot problems. Some of that is masked by the fact that it does have a very consistent tone to the film, and it has some atmosphere. But I did have big problems with the story. Now, it is the best Blumhouse film in quite a long time, but it's also the worst Leigh Whannell film, in my opinion, of his entire career. Although I'm not reviewing the film at this point, I would say if you do go, enjoy it for what it is, which is a fairly dumb but really well-made thriller. Here's some of the problems I had with the story of The Invisible Man. First off, how did Adrian fake his death to the satisfaction of the authorities? Now, you could say that he's super rich and was able to buy people off, but I don't know if that really works in today's environment. I mean, you're talking about the death of a very public figure. That would draw some scrutiny from the press. They could have handled it. They could have found a good way to make it happen, and I'm sure you can come up with a good reason why people buy that this suicide happened. There would be a financial reaction to his company, though, even if it was privately held. And that's not explored in the movie either. We were just led to believe that he's so fixated on having a kid with Cecilia that he's willing to risk all of it. I found it to be just a plot contrivance that really was not properly addressed. Next, what about that attic with no means of access except for by an external folding ladder? You have to bring a ladder, drag it across your house, put it under it. I mean, who has an attic that's even like that, right? Everyone has either some kind of folding door mechanism or some means to get into the attic except for this one. That's weird enough, but you see that they have stuff stored up there. So that means they do have gone up and down on this folding ladder or a folding ladder to get up there to retrieve stuff or at least put it up there for storage. And that's weird because I would do that exactly one time before I made means to get up there without having to drag a ladder through my house. The bigger problem with the attic and the ladder really is that if Adrian or his brother, because it's not clear which was doing this, was using the attic to hide out, or at least to stash stolen items, how did he move the ladder out from under the attic entrance when he was up there? Because wouldn't it draw attention if someone woke up in the middle of the night and noticed the ladder was there? Wouldn't they just move the ladder and then you're invisible, but you're stuck up in the attic? You're not hurting anyone if you can't get down. It's a pretty big flaw in a plan. And the suit doesn't make ladders invisible, it just makes the person wearing it invisible. So I don't know. It seems like a really not well thought out plan at all, and one that could have gone horrifically bad for the Invisible Man. Typically, when someone's reported to have died, the police are called, they come in, they investigate, which couldn't have happened here, but let's say there's some kind of conspiracy, some payoff, they still would take the dog away, right? I mean, they're not going to leave a dog in an empty house to starve to death. So Cecilia gets $100,000 a month, and the first thing she does is go to a job interview. So Cecilia recovers Adrian's phone in the attic, and it has photos of her sleeping in Sydney's bed when the two girls are side by side. It's a creepy shot, right? It's like it's one of our big fears is to be spied on that intimately. But wait a second. In her hand, she has proof that there's someone else in the house. If she just shows this to James, he's going to believe her that something's going on. Maybe not that there's someone who's invisible, but at the very least, he's going to think that someone has broken into his house, invaded his house, put both his best friend and his daughter in jeopardy. Immediately, you have a big ally. But she doesn't do that. She doesn't even attempt to do that. So Cecilia goes back to Adrian's house, and she steals the suit from the lab. She doesn't know whether Adrian is there or not. She suspects he is, so she decides to hide the suit. But all that takes more time than if she'd just run out the front door with the suit. The only reason she hides the suit is so that it's available for the final act, which is a convenience of the plot, but doesn't make a bit of sense because if she has the suit, it proves absolutely everything she's saying. But she doesn't do that because we want to have a really neat final scene. So Adrian at some point switches out Cecilia's birth control. Now, this doesn't really hold because, I mean, there's side effects to birth control, and women usually notice them. And it's not as if she didn't go to a doctor who probably prepared her for those side effects when he prescribed it for her. It's just really convenient that she doesn't notice. And even if you found a pill that really looked the same, wouldn't that pill then have some kind of a effect on her? Because, I mean, a medication is a medication. If it was a placebo, a water pill or something, maybe, but water pills cause a reaction to your body. It just seems like she was willfully ignorant. Cecilia's sister can't read her sister's voice in an email. I mean, I know I've received emails from people and I can definitely hear their voice in the email. I mean, sometimes when something is really like a form letter or, it's a very professional document, maybe not. But when I'm just receiving an email from a friend or an associate or someone I've worked with, I can tell it's written by them. If it's someone I grew up with, a sister, I would definitely be able to tell whether they wrote it. And let's say Adrian did an amazing job. He has this hidden talent for impersonating other people's voices in text. Okay, but what would you do if your sister or brother sent you that email saying that they wish you were dead? All of us would do the same thing. First thing, we would get on the phone and the conversation would start this way. What the? Now, am I wrong, or is it standard practice for cops to be able to sit in and participate in the interrogations of their roommates? Is that a thing that happens in any state in this country? Is that a normal law enforcement method? I don't buy it. And hey, isn't it really lucky that high-tech reflective camera invisible man suit fits someone a foot shorter than they are? Because the final scene doesn't make any sense if it doesn't. So I guess it really shrinks even with all that machinery that covers every inch of it. No. So Adrian is this powerful guy. We see him tossing cops around left and right and beating people up. He's a bigger guy. He looks to be powerful. But he can't stop Cecilia from lifting one of his arms and slitting his throat. Which, I'm sorry, she looks like she weighs about 95 pounds. I have problems with that. It's a neat scene. I get it. But it doesn't make a lick of sense. And finally, the very last thing in the film, why does James have a problem with Cecilia killing Adrian anyway? I mean, he's a cop, I understand the oath, but, Adrian tried to kill James's daughter. I mean, he assaulted his daughter. I just don't think you give a pass to the guy who at the very least conspired to attack your family. Doesn't make sense. Listen, you can look at any film extremely critically and pull it apart. It's hard to create a narrative that really is airtight. And that's not a standard I would really subscribe to for horror films at all. Fantasy films are allowed to have fantastical elements. The problem I have here is that this film attempted to ground the fantastic elements of The Invisible Man. It tried to make it plausible, something the original Claude Rains film never did. It understood that a fantasy element should be allowed to be a fantasy element. This wanted to make it feel real. I judge a film based on what it tells me is the criterion to judge it. And in this case, it fails its own methodology.